The sound came first, a sharp, obscene tear, like a suppressed scream given form. It sliced through the polite murmur of the Global Innovators Gala, a sound so alien in a world of clinking crystal and soft silk that it brought 100 conversations to a dead stop. For Dr. Anya Sharma, the sound was secondary to the sensation that preceded it, the sudden, invasive chill of the ballroom's air-conditioned atmosphere on her bare shoulder, where, only a moment before, the warm, weighted comfort of Italian silk had rested. Then came the scent. Sharp and cloying Eleanor Vance's signature blend of white gardenia and something cold, something metallic. That always smelled to Anya like old money and older cruelty. Eleanor stood before her fingers still curled from the act of destruction. A thin, brittle smile stretched her lips, a masterpiece of social violence that never reached her glacial blue eyes. She held a half-empty flute of champagne, her knuckles white, the predatory gleam in the eyes of the guests surrounding them transformed from passive appraisal to active, ravenous interest. They were sharks, and the sound of ripping fabric was blood in the water. "Luxury does not belong on black skin," Eleanor Vance declared, her voice not a whisper, but a pronouncement, pitched to carry over the now silent string quartet. The words didn't just land, they detonated. They shattered the fragile opulence of the evening and triggered something deep within Anya. A memory she kept locked away, preserved in the amber of childhood trauma. The air is thick with the smell of rain-soaked wool and defeat. She is 10 years old, her hand swallowed in her father's much larger one. They stand in a cavernous, wood-paneled office, the kind with leather-bound books that are never read. A man with a face like curdled milk and the same glacial blue eyes as his daughter, a young Eleanor, glares down at them from behind a mahogany desk the size of a small boat. This is Arthur Vance, a titan of industry, a king in his own kingdom. Her father, a brilliant chemical engineer named Samir Sharma, stands before him, his shoulders slumped, his genius no match for the man's power. "You were careless, Samir," Arthur Vance says, his voice a low rumble of disappointment that feels more dangerous than a shout. "This mistake, it's catastrophic. It will ruin me." "It was an accident." "Arthur," her father pleads, his voice strained. "A faulty valve, a pressure miscalculation. It could have happened to anyone." "But it happened to you," Vance says, his tone final. "On my property, under my name." He gestures dismissively. "You and your family will have to leave the company housing. Your position is terminated. I suggest you find work far from here." The Vance name is not to be associated with this failure. Anya feels her father's hand tighten around hers. She dares to peek around his leg at the man behind the desk. And beside him, standing in a pale pink dress, is Eleanor, a girl of 12, watching with a chillingly adult expression of contempt. Her eyes meet Anya's, and for a fleeting moment, Anya sees not a child, but a reflection of the father's cold dismissal. They are being cast out, shamed, their lives dismantled by a single, powerful man. Her father squeezes her hand, a silent command. "Hold your head high. Anya. Always." Anya's return to the present was a silent, seamless recalibration. The cold draft on her skin, the weight of 200 pairs of eyes, the oppressive grandeur of the crystal chandeliers dripping light like frozen tears, it all sharpened into a crystalline focus. Her composed, silent reaction was not shock. It was not weakness. It was the result of 30 years of preparation. The little girl in the wood-paneled office had grown up, and she had never forgotten the lesson of that day, that in this world, power was not given, it was taken. Her silence was an act of supreme, chilling self-control. a conscious decision to let Eleanor Vance believe she had won this opening salvo. Eleanor, mistaking stillness for surrender, pressed her advantage. She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume a suffocating cloud. "That gown is so bold on you. Anya, a brave choice." The insult was cloaked in the language of the elite, a compliment twisted into a dagger. Anya met her gaze. She did not raise her voice. She did not flinch. She simply smoothed the raw, shredded edge of her gown with a steady hand, the gesture as calm and deliberate as if she were adjusting a cufflink before a board meeting. The torn fabric fell away, exposing the clean, strong line of her shoulder. The crowd waited for her to shrink, to cry, to shout. She did none of those things. Her eyes, darker than the Cabernet staining the floor from a guest's dropped glass, held Eleanor's. This act of public humiliation was not the beginning of a fight. It was the trigger for its end. Anya had spent a lifetime building an empire on a foundation of quiet brilliance and strategic patience. And Eleanor Vance had just handed her the formal invitation to burn her enemy's world to the ground. Anya moved through the frenzied aftermath of the gala like a ghost. She didn't flee. She made a controlled, deliberate exit, her posture as impeccable as if she were still wearing the gown in its intended state. The whispers followed her, a rustling wave of shock and schadenfreude. She felt the pinpricks of a dozen smartphone cameras on her back, but she ignored them. The spectacle was no longer her concern. It was a piece of data, an event to be processed and leveraged. The chilled air of the Manhattan night was a relief after the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. Her driver, a stoic man named David, who had been with her for 5 years, opened the door to the waiting town car without a word, his expression unreadable, but for a subtle tightening around his eyes. He had seen the first viral clips already. The ride uptown was silent. The city lights smeared across the tinted windows, a river of fractured gold and neon. Anya didn't look out. She stared straight ahead, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Inside, however, her mind was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, variables clicking into place, contingency plans activating, protocol Orion 7. The sequence was initiated. The humiliation was the key, the moral justification she hadn't realized she needed. It clarified the stakes, transforming a strategic corporate takeover into something more primal, more just. It was no longer simply business. It was a reckoning. Her apartment was a sanctuary of controlled calm, a stark contrast to the cloying opulence of the gala, located in a slender, minimalist tower overlooking Central Park. Its interiors were a study in gray, white, and black, polished concrete floors, vast panes of glass, and carefully curated pieces of abstract art. There was no clutter, no sentimentality. It was a space designed for clarity and focus, a physical manifestation of her own mind. She walked into her dressing room, a space larger than most New York studio apartments, and stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She looked at the woman staring back the torn black silk, the angry red stain of wine blooming across the bodice. She saw not a victim, but a soldier on the eve of battle, the ceremonial paint already applied. With methodical precision, she unzipped the gown and let it pool at her feet, stepping out of the ruined garment as if shedding a skin. She left it there on the floor, a casualty of a war Eleanor Vance didn't even know she was losing. Showered and changed into a simple set of gray silk pajamas, Anya moved to the main living area. The entire north wall was a single pane of glass, and the city glittered below her like a conquered territory. She poured herself a glass of water, the ice cubes clinking softly in the silence, and dialed a number on her encrypted phone. It was answered on the first ring. "Marcus," she said, her voice even. "Anya." I've seen the feeds. Are you all right? Marcus Thorne's voice was a low, steady baritone, the sound of unwavering loyalty and legal genius, as her chief counsel and oldest friend. He was one of the few people who knew the full scope of her ambition. "I'm fine," she said. And it was the truth. The pain of the moment had already been filed away, catalogued as motivation. It was more public than we anticipated. But the effect is the same. It's begun. "They tried to call you a trespasser. Security was called," Marcus said, a note of cold fury underpinning his professional calm. "They did," Anya confirmed, taking a sip of water. Eleanor played her part perfectly. Arrogant, cruel, entitled. She created a narrative of prejudice so clear, so undeniable, that no one will question what comes next. "And what comes next?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. They had rehearsed this 100 times. "Activate the acquisition of Faro Logistics," Anya instructed. "Use the secondary holding company. It must be untraceable back to Sharma Analytics for now. And Marcus, find everything you can on the Vance Sharma incident from 30 years ago. The sealed files, the police report, the non-disclosure agreements Arthur Vance forced on his staff. I want it all. I have a feeling the key to her finances is buried in the same grave as my father's reputation." There was a pause on the line. "You're sure about this?" Anya poking at that particular wound. Anya looked down at the city lights. Each one represented a life, a story, a struggle. Her own struggle had begun in a wood-paneled office, with a lie that had cost her family everything. Her father had died 10 years later, a brilliant man diminished by a failure that wasn't his. His spirit eroded by the quiet shame of being cast out. Eleanor's hatred isn't just about class or race. "Marcus," Anya said softly, her voice infused with a certainty that had taken her years to piece together. "It's personal. She blames my father for her family's near ruin. She believes the story her father told her. Tonight. She tried to make me pay for his alleged sins. She has no idea that the real debt is hers to settle." She ended the call and stood by the window for a long time, watching the city breathe. The proposed merger between Sharma Analytics and Vance Industries wasn't a partnership. It was a Trojan horse, meticulously designed to be brought inside the walls of her enemy. For years, she had built her company, Sharma Analytics, into a titan of data science and predictive modeling, all while Vance Industries, a legacy conglomerate built on old manufacturing, slowly stagnated under Eleanor's unimaginative leadership. The merger was presented as a lifeline for Vance, a way to modernize and survive. For Anya, it was the final move in a chess match that had started when she was 10 years old. The humiliation at the gala was not the wound. It was the salt poured into a much older one. A final desecration that absolved her of any lingering guilt about the devastation she was about to unleash. She felt a cold, clean calm settle over her. The game was afoot. 2 weeks later, in the sterile tension of the Vance Industries boardroom, Eleanor Vance presided over her executive committee meeting. The room was a shrine to patriarchal history, dark mahogany, portraits of stern-faced Vance men on the walls, and the lingering scent of polish and power. The incident at the gala had become a contained storm, thanks to a team of aggressive public relations experts. The narrative had been spun into a regrettable, champagne-fueled misunderstanding. Anya Sharma was painted as an oversensitive newcomer, and Eleanor as a victim of cancel culture. To the outside world, it was a gossip column headline that had already faded. To Eleanor, it was a satisfying, if messy, reassertion of her dominance. "Next item," she said, her tone crisp. "Third quarter logistics report." Her COO, A nervous man named Gregory cleared his throat. "There's a small issue. Ms. Vance, our primary shipping partner in South America, Marisol Freight, has been acquired." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand, examining her manicure. "So, find another. They're a dime a dozen." "That's the problem," Gregory stammered, shuffling his papers. "They were all acquired. A new entity, Faro Logistics, has consolidated the entire region's shipping network in the last 48 hours. They've established a complete monopoly." Eleanor's head snapped up. "What? How is that possible? Antitrust laws?" "They structured it through a series of shell corporations registered in 3 different countries. It's legally airtight, if ethically questionable. The point is, our shipping costs for the Andean Lithium Division have just been increased by 200%. Effective immediately. It will cripple our profit margins for the year." A cold knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. "Who owns Faro Logistics?" "We're still tracing the ownership," Gregory said, sweating lightly under the force of her glare. "It's opaque." Later that day, her private line rang. It was Anya Sharma. "Eleanor." Anya's voice was cool and smooth, like polished stone. "I trust you're having a productive day." "What did you do?" Eleanor snapped, dispensing with pleasantries. "I'm not sure what you mean," Anya replied, a faint, almost imperceptible note of amusement in her voice. "I was simply calling to follow up on our preliminary merger discussions. I hope recent social events haven't soured your appetite for a mutually beneficial partnership." "You bought the shipping network," Eleanor accused, her voice low and furious. "Business is about anticipating needs and securing assets. Eleanor, a lesson I'm sure your father taught you well," Anya said. The mention of her father was a subtle, deliberate jab, sometimes the smallest. Most overlooked assets hold the most power. Eleanor gripped the phone tighter. This was more than a nuisance. It was a strategic, surgical strike at one of her company's most vulnerable supply chains. It was a move that required immense capital and breathtaking speed. It was brilliant, and that infuriated her more than anything. "This is a petty game, Anya," Eleanor snarled. "I don't play games," Anya's voice came back, devoid of all warmth. "I build systems, and I protect my investments. Speaking of which, the terms of our merger will need to be revisited, given your new, unforeseen logistical vulnerabilities. Vance Industries' valuation has shifted. I'll have my team send over the revised offer." The line went dead. Eleanor slammed the phone down, her hand trembling. The world she had so carefully controlled suddenly felt less certain. Anya Sharma wasn't just some upstart she could humiliate at a party. She was a planner, a strategist, and she had just drawn first blood. For a moment, Eleanor felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years. Fear. She quickly smothered it with rage. She thought of what her father, Arthur, had always told her: the Sharmas are ambitious, but they lack the stomach for a real fight. They break easily. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city that was hers. Her father was wrong. This Sharma didn't break. This one fought back. And the fight, Eleanor realized with a chilling certainty, had only just begun. She would not be outmaneuvered. She would crush Anya Sharma, absorb her company, and dismantle it piece by piece, until nothing was left but a cautionary tale. "One must be careful not to overreach," she whispered to her reflection in the glass. The words, a venomous echo of her own warning to Anya. This world can be so unforgiving. While Eleanor plotted her retaliation, Anya moved into the next phase of her plan. Her minimalist apartment transformed into a war room. its pristine surfaces now covered in digital schematics, financial projections, and encrypted data streams projected onto the walls. Marcus Thorne had set up a secure base of operations in her study, his calm presence a steadying anchor in the storm they were creating. "The preliminary forensics on the old Vance files are in," Marcus said one evening, sliding a tablet across the polished concrete table between them. He looked tired, the skin under his eyes a shade darker than usual. Arthur Vance was a master at burying his secrets. Most of the digital records from that era were corrupted in a server migration in the late 90s. The physical copies were supposedly lost in a warehouse fire. A convenient fire, Anya noted, her eyes scanning the data. Very. Marcus agreed. But he wasn't perfect. "We found a severance agreement for a plant manager, a man named Henderson. He was fired 2 days after the accident. The NDA attached to it was ironclad. But the payment was astronomical. 6 times his annual salary. Paid out through an offshore account. That's not severance. That's hush money." Anya zoomed in on the document. "Find him." Marcus. While Marcus's team hunted for a ghost from the past, Anya's own ghosts were becoming more active. The stress of the unfolding plan manifested in her sleep. Nightmares, fragmented and terrifying, began to plague her. She was 10 years old again, standing in the middle of a factory floor. The air was thick with a chemical smell that burned her throat. A siren blared, a relentless, deafening scream. In the dream, her father was there, shouting at her, his face contorted in panic. But she couldn't hear his words over the noise. Then, the glint of something metallic, a valve or a pipe, twisting under pressure, and always, just before she woke up in a cold sweat, she would see a pair of glacial blue eyes watching from the shadows. She knew the nightmares were her subconscious trying to process the trauma, but they were also a reminder of the stakes. This wasn't just for her father's honor. It was for the little girl who had been taught to fear the world of power and privilege. The girl she had worked so hard to armor in success. Days later, Marcus brought her a new piece of the puzzle. It was a single, heavily redacted newspaper clipping from a local paper, dated a week after the incident. The headline read, "Vance Chemical Plant Averts Disaster Engineer's Negligence to Blame." Most of the article was blacked out, but one paragraph remained, a quote from a stoic Arthur Vance. "We are grateful that no lives were lost, thanks to the swift action of our safety teams. However, the negligence that led to this near catastrophe is inexcusable. Mr. Samir Sharma has taken full responsibility for the equipment failure, and his employment has been terminated." Anya stared at the words "taken full responsibility." Her father had never been a negligent man. He was meticulous, brilliant, a perfectionist. He had triple-checked every calculation, every protocol. The story had never made sense. "He took the blame," Anya whispered, a cold realization dawning on her. "He didn't just get fired. Marcus. He actively took the fall for it." "It looks that way," Marcus said grimly. "The question is why? What was Arthur Vance holding over him?" As they dug deeper into the past, Eleanor made her countermove in the present. It was as clumsy as Anya's had been precise, believing Anya's company to be a fragile, new money enterprise. Eleanor used her old guard influence to attack its reputation. Anonymously sourced articles began appearing in financial blogs, questioning the ethics of Sharma Analytics' data-gathering methods. Rumors circulated about an impending regulatory investigation. A key supplier for their server hardware, a company whose board members were old friends of the Vance family, suddenly canceled a major contract, citing vague ethical concerns. Eleanor expected panic. She expected Anya's investors to get spooked, for her stock to waver. But Anya had anticipated this. For years, she had been building a fortress. Her data gathering was not only ethical, but had set a new industry standard for privacy, a fact she had documented in painstaking detail. Her investors were locked in with long-term commitments and unwavering loyalty built on years of spectacular returns. And the hardware supplier, Anya, had already secured a secondary, more advanced supplier months ago, a contingency plan for a threat she knew would one day materialize. Anya's response was swift and devastating. She didn't just refute the rumors. She released a full, transparent report on her company's data ethics, co-authored by a leading academic in the field, effectively turning the attack into a massive PR victory. Sharma Analytics stock didn't just hold steady, it rose. The failed hardware blockade was the final piece. Anya leaked the news of the canceled contract and her immediate, seamless transition to a new, superior supplier to a major tech journal. The story painted Vance's cronyism as a failed gambit of an aging dinosaur, and Sharma Analytics as the agile, forward-thinking leader of the new economy. Eleanor was made to look not just malicious, but incompetent. The two women met again, this time at a neutral ground restaurant for a pre-scheduled merger lunch. The air between them crackled with unspoken animosity. "You've been busy," Eleanor said, her smile as thin as a razor's edge. Her attempt to wound Anya had backfired spectacularly, and the humiliation was a fresh, raw wound. "One must be prepared for the unpredictability of the market," Anya replied, calmly unfolding her napkin. She was quoting Eleanor's own veiled threat back to her. "Don't get comfortable, Anya," Eleanor hissed, leaning forward. "You won a little skirmish, but you're still an outsider in this world. And there are debts to be paid. My family remembers what yours did." There it was, the first overt acknowledgement of the past, a confirmation of Anya's theory. "My father was a good man, Eleanor," Anya said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Your father was a reckless fool who nearly cost my family everything," Eleanor shot back, her composure cracking for a moment before she sealed it away again. "He was lucky my father was so generous." Anya simply looked at her, her expression unreadable. Eleanor's rage was built on a lie, a carefully constructed narrative fed to her by her father. And Anya knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the truth would destroy her. The pieces were falling into place. Eleanor's underestimation of her, her blind faith in her family's version of history, her crude, impulsive attacks, it was all leading to one inevitable conclusion. It was time to set the final trap. The idea, when Anya proposed it, was so audacious, so bold, that it took Eleanor completely by surprise. After weeks of corporate skirmishes and back-channel warfare, Anya requested a face-to-face meeting in the Vance Industries boardroom, the heart of her enemy's territory. She walked in alone, projecting an aura of calm confidence that immediately put Eleanor on edge. "I'm tired of these games." "Eleanor," Anya began, her tone direct and businesslike. She stood before the grand mahogany table, refusing to sit, a subtle power play that established her as the petitioner, not the supplicant. "Your attacks have failed. My countermoves have cost you. This Cold War is inefficient and damaging to both our brands." Eleanor leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, the throne from which generations of Vances had ruled. She steepled her fingers, affecting an air of detached amusement. "Are you suggesting a truce?" "Anya, how disappointing." "I'm suggesting an end," Anya replied. "Let's finalize the merger." The statement hung in the air, thick with challenge. Gregory, the COO, who was also in the room, shifted uncomfortably. "Our valuation has changed," Eleanor said coolly. Your recent logistical acquisitions have made you a more attractive partner, but your valuation of my company is insulting. Your valuation is based on legacy assets and declining market share. Anya countered smoothly. Mine is based on proprietary algorithms and exponential growth, but I am willing to be generous. The word dripped with irony, echoing Eleanor's own comment about her father. I am proposing a true merger of equals, Anya continued, her voice resonating with conviction. A new, unified entity, Vance Sharma Global. Think of the narrative. Eleanor, two of the most powerful women in business, rivals turned partners, forging the future together. We announce it at the Global Innovators Gala, on the very stage where we had our misunderstanding. It's a story of reconciliation, of strength. The market will love it. Eleanor stared at her, searching for the trap. The proposal was intoxicating. A merger of equals would publicly frame her as Anya's peer, erasing the humiliation of her failed attacks. It would give her access to Sharma Analytics' revolutionary technology, the key to revitalizing her stagnant company. Most importantly, it would bring Anya Sharma under her roof. Once the companies were merged, Anya would no longer be an external threat. She would be an internal component, one that Eleanor, as the legacy head with deep board connections, could control, sideline, and ultimately, crush. She could absorb Anya's genius, then discard the woman herself. It was the perfect revenge. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. They lacked the stomach for a real fight. Anya's offer, in Eleanor's view, was a white flag disguised as a power move. She was suing for peace because she couldn't win the war. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Eleanor's face. A bold proposal. Anya, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. And the gala. A poetic touch. Very well. Have your people draw up the papers. A merger of equals. Anya nodded, her expression unreadable. Excellent. My team will be in touch. She turned and walked out of the boardroom, her heels clicking with quiet finality on the marble floor. She didn't allow the flicker of victory to show on her face until the elevator doors had closed, leaving her alone in the small, mirrored box. The bait was taken. The Trojan horse was being wheeled toward the gates. In the weeks that followed, the business world was set alight with news of the impending merger. It was the story of the year. Vance Sharma Global was hailed as a visionary powerhouse. Eleanor was lauded for her strategic foresight, while Anya was celebrated as the brilliant innovator who had shattered the glass ceiling. Their joint appearances were masterclasses in feigned cordiality. They smiled for cameras, their body language a study in controlled tension. Eleanor was in her element, basking in the glow of what she saw as her impending victory. She hosted lavish dinners for investors, speaking of a new era of collaboration, while privately planning the systematic dismantling of the Sharma Analytics leadership team post-merger. Her arrogance, fed by the fawning press and her own deep-seated prejudices, blinded her to the dozens of subtle clauses Anya's legal team had woven into the merger agreement clauses that gave Anya's side unilateral control over data integration, digital asset management, and, most critically, a moral turpitude dissolution clause that could be triggered by a single party. While Eleanor planned a celebration, Anya and Marcus worked relentlessly. Their search for the plant manager, Henderson, had finally paid off. They found him living a quiet life in rural Vermont, an old man haunted by a 30-year-old secret. After much persuasion and the guarantee of legal protection, he agreed to sign a sworn affidavit. His testimony was the missing piece of the puzzle. The night of the accident, a teenage Eleanor had been at the plant, visiting her father. There had been an argument. She had stormed off into a restricted area. In a fit of pique, she had tampered with a pressure release valve, wanting to cause a minor, disruptive shutdown to spite her father. But she didn't understand the complex mechanics of the system. Her petulant act triggered a catastrophic chain reaction, a cascade of failures that nearly caused a full-scale chemical explosion. Samir Sharma, doing his final rounds, discovered the crisis and, through an act of incredible bravery and quick thinking, managed to manually contain the breach, saving the plant and the surrounding town, but sustaining minor chemical burns in the process. Arthur Vance's first priority was not safety or truth. It was protecting his daughter. He arrived, saw what had happened, and immediately began the cover-up. He silenced the few staff members who knew, including Henderson, and he cornered Samir Sharma. He gave him a choice: take the blame for the accident and leave quietly with a severance package, or face fabricated charges of criminal negligence that would ruin him and his family forever. To protect his own wife and 10-year-old daughter from a protracted, ugly legal battle they could never win, Samir chose silence. He accepted the role of the villain to save Arthur Vance's child. Anya read the affidavit, her hands shaking not with rage, but with a profound, bone-deep sorrow. Her father hadn't been weak. He had sacrificed his name, his career, his entire life's work, to protect the very girl whose family had cast him out, and that girl had grown into a woman who despised his memory. The final piece was in place. The stage was set at the Global Innovators Gala. The date was circled on Anya's calendar. It was not just the launch of a new company. It was the end of a very old lie. The night of the Global Innovators Gala arrived, thick with the electric hum of anticipation. 1 year to the day from the incident that had gone viral, Anya Sharma and Eleanor Vance were returning to the scene of their conflict, this time as partners. The grand ballroom was even more opulent than before, the scent of lilies and champagne heavier, the flash of diamonds brighter, the air of celebration, however, felt brittle, stretched thin over a deep well of unspoken tension. Anya arrived in a gown of deep sapphire blue, its lines clean and powerful. The dress was a statement, not of luxury, but of unassailable strength. She moved through the crowd with a serene, almost unnerving calm, her eyes taking in every detail: the placement of the cameras, the anxious faces of the investors, the triumphant smirk on Eleanor's face as she held court near the stage. Eleanor was radiant in a gown of shimmering gold, a queen in her reclaimed palace. When she saw Anya, her smile widened. She glided over, a champagne flute in her hand. "You clean up nicely, Anya," she said, her voice a purr of condescension, a vast improvement over last year. "You're finally learning your place." "I've always known my place, Eleanor," Anya replied, her voice even. "The question is whether you know yours." A frisson of annoyance flickered across Eleanor's face before being replaced by her mask of magnanimous victory. "Enjoy the evening. It's going to be a historic night." She turned and swept away, confident in her triumph. Anya watched her go, a quiet stillness settling over her. In her pocket, her phone was a cold, dense weight. On it was the trigger. Marcus was stationed in a mobile command center a block away, linked to a global network of servers, ready to execute the sequence on her command. Everything: 30 years of pain, a lifetime of planning, a father's stolen honor had come down to this single moment. The gala's main event began. The host, a slick television personality, took the stage and began to regale the audience with a glowing introduction about the historic merger of Vance Industries and Sharma Analytics. "And now," he boomed, "please welcome the visionary leaders of the new Vance Sharma Global. Ms. Eleanor Vance, and Dr. Anya Sharma. Eleanor walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, beaming at the crowd. Anya followed, her expression composed, giving a polite nod to the audience. They took their places at two separate lecterns. A massive LED screen behind them displayed the new, elegant Vance Sharma global logo. Eleanor spoke first. Her speech was a masterpiece of coded insults and passive aggression, a victory lap aimed squarely at Anya. Tonight, we celebrate not just a merger, but a union of tradition and ambition, she began, pausing for effect after the word ambition. Vance Industries has always stood for stability, for legacy, but we recognize the need for new energy, for bold ideas, however unseasoned. She smiled in Anya's direction, in welcoming Sharma Analytics into the fold. We are embracing the future. We are providing a steady, experienced hand to guide that raw potential. It takes wisdom to know when you need help, when you need to be brought into a world that is bigger than yourself. It is a lesson some are slower to learn than others. The crowd, mostly allies of the Vance dynasty, chuckled and applauded. Anya stood motionless at her lectern, her face a mask of calm patience. She let Eleanor have her moment. She let her build her pedestal higher and higher, knowing that the fall would be all the more devastating. Eleanor's speech crescendoed. And so, as we sign the final digital documents tonight, live on this very stage, we forge a new path forward, a path where the Vance legacy of leadership will guide us to unprecedented heights. It is truly a new beginning. She gestured to the large screen. If our technical teams could please bring up the signing interface. The Vance Sharma logo faded, replaced by a sleek digital contract, with two empty boxes at the bottom for their electronic signatures. The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. This was the moment. Eleanor picked up the digital pen on her lectern, her movements theatrical. She signed her name with a flourish. Her signature appeared on the screen in elegant gold script. The crowd applauded. Dr. Sharma, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with triumph. The future awaits. Anya looked out at the sea of faces. She saw the predatory gleam in their eyes, the same gleam from a year ago. She thought of her father, of his sacrifice. She thought of the little girl in the wood-paneled office. Hold your head high, Anya, always. She did not pick up the pen. Instead, she reached into her pocket and took out her phone. The room held its breath. With a single, deliberate tap of her thumb, she sent the command. Activate Protocol Orion 7. For a half second, nothing happened. The tension in the ballroom stretched to its breaking point. Eleanor's triumphant smile began to waver, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Then the world broke. The massive LED screen behind the stage flickered violently. The digital contract vanished, replaced by stark, white letters on a black background. The message was brutal in its simplicity. Merger agreement terminated. Reason unilateral dissolution. Clause 28, B. Moral turpitude. Executed by a Sharma. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound of disbelief, of pure shock. Eleanor stared at the screen, her face draining of all color. What? What is this? She stammered, her voice a hoarse whisper into the microphone. This is a joke, a technical glitch. But it was no glitch. At that exact moment, a wave of notifications rippled through the audience. Phones buzzed and chimed in a dissonant chorus. Guests glanced down, their eyes widening in horror. On their screens, financial news alerts were exploding. Vance Sharma merger. Deal collapses live at Gala. Vance Industries, VNC stock, plummets in after hours. Trading. Sharma Analytics. Shah issues statement, citing irreconcilable ethical differences. The room erupted into chaos. The polite facade of the corporate elite crumbled into a panicked mob. Shouts of, "What's happening?" and "I'm ruined," cut through the air. The blinding glare of the stage lights seemed to intensify, trapping Eleanor in a merciless spotlight. But Anya wasn't finished. This was only stage one. With the room's attention now absolute, she calmly stepped forward to her microphone. Her voice, amplified by the speakers, cut through the panic with chilling precision. "There is no glitch, Eleanor," Anya said, her gaze locking onto the stunned woman. "The deal is over. It's over, because a partnership requires a foundation of integrity, something Vance Industries has lacked for over 30 years. As she spoke, Marcus executed stage 2. A meticulously prepared data packet was released to a pre-selected list of journalists, regulators, and federal investigators. It contained irrefutable proof of decades of financial fraud within Vance Industries' cooked books, illegal offshore accounts, and a pattern of corporate sabotage against competitors. It was a digital bomb, and its shockwave hit the room instantly. More alerts lit up the phones. CC launches immediate investigation into Vance Industries for fraud. Leaked documents reveal decades of corruption under Vance leadership. Eleanor Vance named as central figure in massive financial scandal. Eleanor staggered back, her hand flying to her throat. Lies. She choked out. These are all lies. Fabricated. Slander. Is it a lie? Eleanor Anya's voice was relentless, each word a hammer blow. Or is it just a secret you thought was buried deep enough? Your family has a long history of burying unpleasant truths. Doesn't it? It's a tradition that began a long time ago. A tradition that destroyed my family. Now, for stage 3. Anya took a deliberate step toward the center of the stage, her presence commanding the entire room. The chaos subsided into a rapt, horrified silence. Everyone was listening. Everyone was watching. "You all know the story you were told," Anya continued, her voice resonating with the weight of suppressed history. "That my father, Samir Sharma, was a negligent engineer who nearly caused a catastrophe at the Vance chemical plant. That his mistake almost ruined the Vance family. You, Eleanor, have spent your entire life believing that lie. You've built your hatred for me upon it. You felt justified in humiliating me in this very room a year ago, because you believe my family owes yours a debt." She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. Eleanor was trembling now, a cornered animal. "Tonight, that debt is paid," Anya declared, "by revealing the truth." Anya's voice held the entire ballroom captive. The blinding stage lights bleached the color from every face, turning the audience into a gallery of stark, silent witnesses. Eleanor stood frozen, her golden gown a cruel mockery of the triumph she had felt only minutes before. "The story you believe is a lie, Eleanor," Anya said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more personal, more devastating. "A lie your father, Arthur Vance, crafted to protect the real person responsible for the accident 30 years ago." On the massive screen behind them, the text vanished. In its place, a scanned document appeared, its details crisp and clear in high definition. It was the sworn affidavit of Mr. Henderson, the former plant manager. "My father wasn't negligent," Anya stated, her voice shaking with a righteous fury she had suppressed for decades. "He was a hero. He walked into a crisis already in progress and prevented an explosion that would have killed hundreds of people. He saved your father's company, and he saved the town it was built in." She pointed to the screen, where Henderson's notarized signature was clearly visible. The crisis began because a trespasser in a restricted area, someone who had no idea what they were doing, foolishly tampered with a critical pressure release valve in a fit of adolescent rage. Anya took another step closer to Eleanor, her eyes boring into her. The entire world, the live stream, the guests, the frantic reporters now flooding the room seemed to fade away. There were only two people on that stage, caught in the crossfire of a 30-year-old lie. "Your father didn't tell you, did he?" Eleanor Anya's voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the silent hall. "He didn't tell you that the person who almost destroyed his company was you." The final words landed like a physical blow. Eleanor recoiled, a choked, guttural sound escaping her lips. "No," she breathed, shaking her head frantically. "No, that's not true. It wasn't me. It was him. My father told me. It was Sharma. My father took the blame." Anya's voice rose, filled with the pain of a lifetime of injustice. "He took the blame to protect you. A 12-year-old girl. Arthur Vance gave him a choice: accept the disgrace and walk away, or be destroyed by a legal machine he could never hope to fight. My father, a good and honorable man, sacrificed his name, his career, and his future to protect a child from the consequences of her own actions. He gave up everything so that you wouldn't have to live with the truth. And in return, your family cast us out and built an empire on his silence." The screen changed again, displaying a redacted portion of the original police report, now unobscured, mentioning a distraught juvenile female being escorted from the scene. It was followed by bank records, showing the vast sums of money paid to Henderson and others for their silence. The evidence was absolute, irrefutable. The truth, in its full, horrifying scope, finally crashed down upon Eleanor Vance, her carefully constructed reality, the bedrock of her identity and her animosity, shattered into a million pieces. The memory, suppressed for 30 years, came flooding back: the argument with her father, the angry tears, the metallic feel of the valve in her hand, the sound of the siren, the panic, the terror. She let out a raw, agonized scream that echoed through the ballroom, a sound stripped of all artifice and power. It was the sound of a soul breaking. She collapsed to her knees, her golden gown pooling around her like molten metal, her hands covering her face as gut-wrenching sobs tore through her body. Anya stood over her, not in triumph, but in a state of profound, aching sorrow. This was not the sweet victory she had imagined. It was a tragedy, generations in the making. Her revenge was not the destruction of her enemy, but the painful, necessary act of setting the historical record straight. She had not come to destroy Eleanor Vance. She had come to give her back the truth, and the truth had destroyed her all the same. The ballroom remained silent, the guests stunned into immobility. They had come for a celebration of power and wealth. They had witnessed, instead, a raw, brutal, and deeply human exorcism. Anya looked away from the sobbing woman at her feet and toward the cameras, her face a mask of weary resolve. The game was over, the board was cleared, and the ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The live-streamed collapse of Eleanor Vance was more than a corporate scandal. It became a cultural moment, a brutal morality play broadcast in real time. By morning, Vance Industries was in freefall. The board of directors, scrambling to contain the damage, forced Eleanor's immediate resignation. Federal agents were seen entering the Vance Tower with warrants, and by noon, her assets were frozen. The Vance dynasty, a cornerstone of American industry for a century, had crumbled to dust in less than 12 hours. Anya watched the news reports from the quiet sanctuary of her apartment. The television screen showed images of Eleanor, shielded by lawyers, her face pale and broken, being hounded by a media frenzy. There was no satisfaction in it for Anya, only a deep, hollow exhaustion. She had won. She had reclaimed her father's name, but the cost was immense. Marcus arrived late that afternoon, finding her sitting in the dark, the city lights beginning to glitter outside her window. He didn't speak, simply sat in the chair across from her. "It's done," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "It's done," he affirmed. "The world knows the truth. Your father's name has been cleared. More than cleared. He's being hailed as a hero." Tears welled in Anya's eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed. All the years of disciplined control, of strategic patience, of suppressed grief, finally gave way. Her composure, the armor she had worn for a lifetime, cracked. She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands, and for the first time since she was a little girl, holding her father's hand in that terrible office. She allowed herself to weep. She cried for the father she had lost, for the honor he had been denied, and for the terrible, lonely weight of the justice she had been forced to deliver. Marcus sat with her in the gathering darkness, a silent, steadfast witness to the immense personal cost of her victory. Months passed. The world moved on. The name Vance became a synonym for hubris and disgrace. Sharma Analytics, under Anya's steady leadership, soared to new heights, its reputation for integrity as unassailable as its technology. One crisp autumn morning, Anya drove out of the city, leaving the steel and glass towers behind for the decaying industrial landscape of her childhood. She found herself standing before the rusted gates of the old Vance chemical plant. It was abandoned now, a skeleton of brick and steel, its windows shattered like vacant eyes. It was a place of ghosts, a monument to the shared pain that had defined her life and Eleanor's. A crowd of journalists and local community leaders had gathered. Anya stepped up to a simple lectern set up before the gates, her presence commanding and calm. 30 years ago, this place was the site of a tragedy born from lies and fear. She began, her voice clear and strong. It destroyed one family and haunted another for generations. Today, we begin a new chapter. She announced her plan, using a significant portion of the assets acquired from the dismantling of the Vance Empire. She was establishing a new foundation. It would tear down the old factory, decontaminate the land, and, in its place, build a state-of-the-art tech incubator. It would provide funding, mentorship, and resources for underprivileged entrepreneurs, people with brilliant ideas, but without the connections or generational wealth to see them realized. It would be a place where genius, not pedigree, was the sole criterion for success. "This will not be a monument to the past," Anya declared, her gaze sweeping over the dilapidated factory. "It will be a testament to the future, a future built not from the ruins of revenge, but on the foundation of restoration. It will be a place of rebirth." A reporter called out a question. "Dr. Sharma, what will you call this foundation?" Anya paused, a thoughtful, almost sad smile touching her lips. She had considered many names, but there was only one that felt right, one that acknowledged the full, complicated truth of their shared history. "It will be called the Sharma Vance Foundation," she announced. The name was an act of grace, a final, quiet acknowledgement that their stories, for better or worse, were forever intertwined. It was a signal that her ultimate goal had never been simple destruction, but a complex, painful, and necessary act of reclamation for her father. for herself, and even, in a way, for the legacy of the woman she had defeated. She was not just erasing a painful past. She was building something new and hopeful from its ashes.